where did you do your studying and so forth? This is all important. I think it's not only does it speak volumes of how sophisticated this is, but how much knowledge you obtained in your journey. And that I love hearing stuff like this. So please go on.
I mean, it's a never ending journey, honestly.
Yeah, sure.
It never ends. It never ends.
We all perfect our craft, so I get it.
So I did my medical school. I grew up in New York City and in North Jersey, basically my entire life, with the exception of college and my fellowship. I pretty much have always been schooled and did all my training in New York City. So I did my medical school at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and I also did my residency at Mount Sinai in New York City.
How hard, sorry to interrupt you, Jonathan, how hard is it to get into these schools, by the way? Is it super easy to be accepted, or are these schools very competitive in terms of what you're doing?
So to give you an idea, I applied for my neurosurgery residency in the 2011-2012 cycle. So actually a little bit over 10 years ago. At the time, there were about 200 or 300 applicants for basically, in my residency program, it's 7 years and there are only 2 people a year.
Wow.
Okay? So of the 200 to 300 people, and usually you cast a pretty wide net when it comes to applying for different residencies because they're pretty competitive, they're hard to get into, and there are so few spots, you just kind of apply everywhere. So you can imagine how difficult that is to get in. I was very, very lucky. I was very fortunate because in particular at the time, I really wanted to stay in New York City. So I got very lucky that I matched into a program that was competitive to get into, and also met kind of my location requirements. So I ended up staying close to my family and my friends in New York City for 7 years, which was very, 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 very helpful. In particular with a program that can be stressful and can be long hours, and you're working hard, and those cases are long. You want to have that familial support and friend support network to fall back on when you have free time and just want to kind of decompress and chill out. So it was very helpful for me to be.
I think that's such a cool thing that you've said, because you're grinding out for many years and you're not seeing income. It's like you're paying and you're not seeing anything materialize. And I think if anything for the audience that can get out of this is really expect in any business that you're in or any journey of your life, expect to be patient. You'll be years and years into a craft.
Oh, I can't tell you how much. It's so true. When I just to give you an idea, and these are all like published online. These are because we're when I was when you're in medical school, you're obviously taking on debt. But when you're in residency, you do start making money, a nominal amount of money, but you're making money. So my first paycheck, I was making, so my first year of residency, I was making $60,000 a year, and my rent, and I'm paying New York City taxes. I'm paying, state, New York City, all these kinds of taxes. So it's not really, at the end of the day, it's not too much to take home. And this was subsidized rent in New York City because I actually lived in hospital housing, right? It was basically $2,000 a month. And then I also have to pay my student loans because, you're on top of that, right? So you can imagine how much you have left over at the end of the day. It's like, it's really not that much. But, that's one of those things where you can't really get caught up in that, and you bring up a good point about kind of the grind, because there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You see where you're going, what it's going to be, right? You have to be patient. You have to work hard, keep your head down. You're going to get through it. All these things will pass. And eventually, you're going to be making a healthy salary. You're going to have more time. You're going to have the freedom you want to get out there, to run the practice the way you want to do surgery the way you want to make money. I mean, these are all things, but you have to be patient. I see the people who run into problems early on, and even when they finish, are the ones who are impatient. They just want to just jump into things, and that can be a big problem.
Yeah, that's a challenge. I mean, I think it's such a challenge for a lot of people. I think the ones that know how to center themselves to continue it, it's a special craft. I personally, even myself, sometimes get impatient and I have to check myself. But let's talk more about you, Jonathan. When you were young, were you like, I'm going to be a back surgeon? Like, how the hell did you get into spinal surgery and decide that this was for you? Did you watch a cartoon somewhere where Bugs Bunny broke his back? And I don't know, like I didn't grow up going, I'm going to be a spinal surgeon. And obviously somewhere along the line, something influenced you into this type of venture, and tell us a little bit about that. I'm curious.
When I was growing up, so I grew up in North Jersey for the basically most of my life, in a very kind of a middle class neighborhood. And when I was growing up, I kind of, you know, basically like most of other people and most of my classmates, I kind of didn't really know what I wanted to do. I went through all the different things. At one point, I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to be a guitarist. I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be president. I wanted to be a cop. You know, all those things. I was fortunate that I had a role model, my uncle, who's a cardiologist.
Okay.
You know, I think, you know, if you kind of think about it early on, right? You kind of branch out. If you kind of like math and science, right? You kind of go like, you know, math and science, or you do more like history, political science, business, you know, they're kind of like, there's a little bit of a branch point there, a little bit, right? And if you're more of a science kind of person, which I found myself gravitating more towards, like biology and chemistry, you tend to gravitate towards pre-med a little bit, right? So I was fortunate that I had an uncle who was a cardiologist. And when I was in high school, primarily, he kind of took me under his wing. He brought me into his office. He showed me what he did. And I remember walking in there, and I remember seeing him see patients. I remember him putting on an EKG, you know, the little monitor that measures the heartbeat, and a stethoscope. And I thought it blew my mind. I could not believe what I was seeing. I thought it was like space age. Wow. You know, an EKG. Oh my God. You know?
And while you're talking about EKG, I have a funny story with an EKG. One time I'm in the office and I get a phone call from my doctor. He just brought it up. And he's like, get to the office now. Your potassium levels are through the roof. You might be, you know, you might have a heart attack any second. And I'm like, oh my God. I tell my employees at the time, my closest employee was a Hell's Angel, which is really a different story, but or is, I don't know what it was. Anyway, but I get to the doctor and we do EKG test, right? So for my heart, he's like, well, it looks okay. I'm going to send you to this heart doctor, a cardiologist. So I go to the heart doctor, and the heart doctor goes, which doctor is that? Oh, he's an idiot. You just need to drink more water. Come back and see me in 5 years. So this like span of 6 hours of me panicking was a mess. But sorry, just to interrupt. Go ahead about your uncle. You saw him in the office.
Yeah. He took me under his wing. He brought me to his office. I loved what he did. And I loved more the idea of being a doctor. I liked seeing patients. I liked helping them. I liked working with their families, working with them, advising them on what the best course of action was. It was so interesting to me. So I carried that on. You know, what you basically have to do to get into medical school is you have to maintain a good overall GPA. Your grades have to be good.
What is a good GPA in your mind for medical school? Like overall, I wasn't a good student, but you know, in community college I did better. But what is in regards to your mind for a good program such as the one you're in? What do you have to have for people?
A good rule of thumb is basically, so you know, an A- is like a 3.8 roughly, right? So basically anything above a 3.8 would be B plus, A-, like that range. But you know, they don't only look at grades. They look at kind of the whole picture. So grades is one important aspect of it, but they also look at standardized testing such as your MCAT. That's a super important part of the application. How you perform an interview day, your letters of recommendation, volunteering, extracurricular, all these things, kind of if you've won any awards, how active you were in your student body, things like that. They really want like a very complete person. You know, they don't want someone who can just study and take a test.
You're going to be seeing people in person. They want to know that you also have the quality of skill to communicate with somebody. I mean, that's so important in your profession. 100%. Calm them down and so forth, right? I mean, that's probably a big one.
I'm telling you, it's so interesting how you know, in many ways. So you know, when you go through college and in your first 2 years of medical school are basically all books. You're literally studying day in, day out, test. Then you take your boards. So your boards are basically this 3-part thing. They're called the USMLEs. And you step 1, step 2, and step 3. And you take your step 1 in between your second and third year. And that kind of, when you pass that marks your transition from studying all the time to actually no more books, no more written tests in the kind of traditional sense. And now you're in the real world. Now you get your white coat, you get your stethoscope, and you're in the hospital, you're working with residents, you're seeing patients, you're writing notes, you're putting in orders, just like a doctor would.
You're thrown into the pit.
You are just thrown into the deep end. Yeah, 100%. It's amazing how some people, they really excel in this environment. They just do wonderful. It's like you've been waiting for this your entire life. You know, you're ready to just grab the bull by its horns, right? And some people, they really, really don't do so great. And the reason why it's interesting is just the thing that you talked about, because it's very easy in some ways to just, your whole life is just studying for a test, taking a test, passing a test, move on to the next class. And you just keep going in that route. But if you don't develop people skills, the chemistry, the ability to communicate with people, put them at ease, talk with them, help them understand something, you know, a very complicated medical subject in a way that, you know, I always say, like, look, if you can't explain this to a fourth grader, then you yourself don't understand it that well. You know what I'm saying? That's such an important skill, because think about it, like neurosurgery, I don't even understand a lot of neurosurgery, right? And I've been doing it for years and almost over a decade, right? And so but I have to be able to explain a very complicated surgery, you know, the indications, the postoperative recovery, what's to be expected, to someone who has no medical background, right? You have to be able to develop that connection. You have to be able to explain complicated tasks to anybody, really. I think if you do that,
not freak them out, and not really freak them out, right?
Exactly, and not freak them out, right? Because you don't want to be like it's easy to fall back and be like, okay, the risk of the surgery is paralysis, nerve root injury, CSF leak, you know, death, coma, paralysis. You know, you just go through this whole laundry list, and it just, you know, you can just put your, you know, it becomes robotic in a way. But you can't really do that. You have to be able to explain things in a way that a patient will understand it, will get it, will be reasonable. So it's not easy. It's not an easy skill.